guest tonight is Charles Finley, and he has for a few years been thought of as one of the more controversial owners of team owners in pro baseball. The recent controversy came up because he sold 3 ball players from Oakland to other teams for a cash value of $3.5 million, and Bowie Kuhn, the baseball commissioner, stepped in and vetoed that sale. And then Charlie Finley, I understand, filed a $10 million lawsuit against the baseball league. It's quite a mess. At any rate, he's a very colorful man, and he's guided the Oakland Athletics to 5 consecutive division championships and 3 consecutive world championships. Would you welcome, please, Charlie O. Finley. Good to have you here, Mr. Finley.
Thanks, John. It's a real pleasure and honor to be with you.
Thank you. I have read more about you in the past few months than I have practically of any of the presidential candidates and politicians. How does it feel to get so much? Well, you've always had press, either pro or con during your years. You handle that well? I mean, can you live with the criticism when the people get on you?
Well, Johnny, sometimes it gets a little rough.
Yeah.
But, you got to grin and bear it.
Yeah.
In the end, things seem to work out pretty good.
Yeah. Let's talk about, you've been fairly innovative in baseball. Before we get into the controversy about what's really going on, and you came up with the designated hitter concept?
Designated hitter,
right.
Which I think has added a lot of action and at the same time interest to the game of baseball.
You think baseball kind of fell into traditions, and people are reluctant sometimes to change anything in sports? They want it the way it always was, and they kind of hold to those concepts?
Well, I'm sorry to say, Johnny, especially in baseball, that seems to be the problem that we've had.
Right.
But baseball is still a great game, and all we've got to do is make a few changes in it, and I think it'll be back as the #1 sport of the nation.
Right.
You were mentioning an innovation. One of the things that I'm really proud about is that we started the World Series games on Saturday. Game 1 and 2, Saturday and Sunday, and then we play 3 games at night during the week.
Right.
And this way it enables everyone, especially today's children, who incidentally are tomorrow's baseball fans, where they'll be able to see the games, all the World Series games.
This was your idea, because originally they started like in the middle of the week sometime, did they not?
That's exactly right. Yes, I worked on this for about 10 years before I was able to get it passed through baseball.
Now, why would they fight you on that? That seems like a logical, constructive move. Why would they say we don't want to do that?
John, to me, that's very easy for me to answer in one word: stupidity.
He said, choosing his words carefully. In other words, you think they just get locked into old-fashioned ideas and don't want to make a change just for the sake of saying, this is the way it was and this is the way it's going to be?
Unfortunately, Johnny, that's been the trend. And I'm most hopeful that they'll wake up and start making some changes that is going to be good for baseball.
Now, we just said hello briefly before the show, and you showed me something that I know you're trying to get into baseball. And when you see this, the baseball purists will probably go, my God, what is it? Now, if you have a color television set, this is a bright orange baseball. And, of course, in baseball, the baseballs have been white ever since baseball came into being, and you would like to change that.
I sure would.
Why? And what?
Well, Johnny, with an alert orange baseball, #1, you got to think about the fans. This will enable the fans to follow the flight of the ball much easier than a white ball. Right. And #2, the hitters, they can see that ball coming out of that pitcher's white uniform an awful lot easier. Oh. And it's going to enable the hitters to improve on their batting averages. It's going to put more action into the games, and the fans are going to like it very much. But the pitchers, they despise the ball.
Why don't they like it?
Well, because you just take this ball here, and may I,
sure.
I toss it out in the audience, and look at there, somebody catch that. Look at that, he caught it without dropping it.
Because it's, in other words, optically, it's easier to see.
Yes, it is.
I think you get the feeling, well, I'm sure it's one of your comments about baseball, is you figure that it's kind of stacked against the batter.
Yes, yes, it is, John. You take football, you go to a football game, you see 11 players against 11.
Right.
You go to a basketball game, there's 5 against 5. Hockey game, 6 against 6.
Right.
You go to a baseball game, there's 9 against 1. There's 9 players out there on that field, and there's one fella comes up to the plate with a little stick in his hand, and the 9 guys gang up on him. You know?
Isn't that the idea of the game? I mean, never looked at it that way. So this, you think by the introduction of this ball, that'll kind of equalize it a little bit?
Well, what I'd like to see baseball do is to balance the defense with the offense. Mm-hmm. And this is one way that's one way that would help balance the offense with the defense. Another thing...
I remember when tennis went from the white tennis ball to the yellow tennis ball, and now the yellow tennis ball is almost universally used because optically it is easier to see than a white tennis ball.
That's very true. And another thing, John, that I'd like to see baseball adopt is ball 3 and strike 3. And do away with the ball 4. And briefly, I'd just like to tell you this, that when professional baseball first started, it started out with 9 balls and 5 strikes.
Are you serious?
I'm
serious.
That I didn't know. Yeah, that was in 1878. And
well, the pitcher must have been out there all day.
Well, they were. And as a matter of fact, in 1886, by 1886, they had gradually reduced it down to 4 balls and 3 strikes. Now, that's 90 years ago. There's nothing been done at all on balls and strikes in those 90 years.
So you'd like to see 3 balls?
I'd like to see 3 balls and 3 strikes. This will speed the game up, and it will force the pitcher to come in throwing strikes instead of wasting pitches once he gets a hitter in the hole.
What do you think about passing somebody or walking somebody with a 4, where the catcher moves out and they just throw 4 balls to put him on first?
I think that's the stupidest thing that baseball does, is, you know, throw the ball.
You're going to put him on. Do they keep that in because they think that possibly the batter might jump out and slug it?
That's what they think, you know.
But it's never done, is it?
Well, maybe once in 100,000 times. You know, I think that if you're going to walk a player, just put a signal up and send that fellow right down to first base.
Let me take a break here, and we'll come back and follow up on this. Stay right where you are. We are back. And with us tonight was Charles Finley, the owner of the Oakland A. We have George Peppard, Charlie Callas, and Dr. Geoffrey Bourne. Charles, let's get into this controversy a little bit, what's going on in baseball. Now, you have 3 ball players, Vita Blue, Joe Rudy, and Raleigh Fingers, which you sold, and as I understand, they are working out their option on the team. This is their last year, right?
Supposedly,
Supposedly.
Yes.
And
As a matter of fact, they haven't signed.
Right, and under the rules of that, if a ball player exercises and finishes out, then he becomes a free agent and is able to sell his services to the highest bidder.
Right.
Now, what you did is that you sold them to the New York Yankees, or to different teams, right? These 3 players for a total of
For a total of $3.5 million.
$3.5 million. Now, Bowie Kuhn, the commissioner of baseball, he called you into his office, and I understand you had a meeting, and he says he was going to veto that in the best interest of baseball to protect the honor of the game, right?
That's
so
what
I
he
may
told
be
me.
paraphrasing his words, but
that's what he told me.
now why did he stop the sale?
Well, you know, John, it's pretty hard for me to figure that out. As a matter of fact, I'm just anxiously awaiting the time when Bowie Kuhn will tell it to the judge when he stopped it.
That's right. You did file a $10 million lawsuit. Now, I think what concerns a lot of people, and some of this has been in the press, they said, well, it's not fair that professional team owners can buy and sell baseball players like cattle or chattel slaves or so forth, and that the players should be free to make their own deals and should not be held and, in other words, bartered like cattle. How do you feel about that?
Well, Johnny, you know, ever since the history of the game, players have been bought and sold. You go back to the days when Babe Ruth was sold from Boston to the Yankees. I recall Dizzy Dean when he was sold to the Cubs for $185,000. 1934, Joe Cronin was sold to the Boston Red Sox from Washington, and at that time he was sold for $250,000. That $250,000 in 1934 is worth $1,040,000 today. And there's Ferguson Jenkins was sold for $200,000 recently in November of 1975. Commissioner said nothing about that deal. A little later on, Minnesota Twins sold Bert Blyleven to Texas for $250,000.
Right.
And just last year, the San Francisco Giants sold Dave Kingman to the New York Mets, who incidentally, for $160,000, who incidentally is leading the major leagues with 26 home runs today. Did the commissioner say anything about that? Nothing at all. And let me take you one step further. In 1971, the Oakland A's, if you please, paid the then Washington Senators $300,000 for Darrell Knowles and Mike Epstein. Did the commissioner do anything about that? No. But when I sell 3 players myself, and for business reasons, plus the fact I was going to take that money and end up with a much stronger team by purchasing these some 52 ball players who are playing out their options right now. And I was going to have a stronger team in 1977 than I had starting in 1976. As it stands right now, I'm going to have nothing.
So these players are not playing for anyone right now, right?
Well, they're playing for the A's, but I don't think that it's my property. The commissioner forced me to use these players after I'd sold them.
So they are still playing for Oakland.
Yes, sir.
Now, what will happen at the end of the season? This is now up to the courts, is it?
Well, it's in the hands of the court, the federal court in Chicago, and we're very optimistic over our chances of winning this lawsuit. I might say that Bowie Kuhn has been the 5th commissioner in baseball, and never in the history of the game of baseball has a commissioner ever stepped in to stop a sale of a ball player. And why he stopped this one, as I say, let him tell it to the judge.
Yeah. Do you think it could be a personal vendetta?
Well, yes, I really do. I'm sorry to say, John.
Yeah.
And it's quite unfortunate. I was fined one time in the World Series in 1973 when we were playing the New York Mets. We took a player that the doctor said don't play him by the name of Mike Andrews.
I remember that.
And the only thing I did was give the letter to the commissioner of baseball where the doctor said don't play Mike Andrews. He's physically unable to play anymore in the series. If you use him, you'll hurt him. I handed him that letter, and would you believe it? He fined me $5,000 just because a doctor examined Mike Andrews and said that he was physically unable to play. And during that same World Series, I was fined another $2,000 because it got so dark out there. The umpire forgot to turn the lights on, and I sent word up to the electrician to turn the lights on, and when I did, the umpire jumped up like something had been shot, wanted the lights back off again. So I was fined $2,000 for that. But let me say this, at the end of the season, baseball changed their rules to where the lights can be turned on at any time, not at the end of an inning. So I got fined $2,000 for that. And in the same World Series, he fined me another $1,000 because we only used 24 players, and I wanted to make an announcement to the fans that we were playing with 24, and the Mets had 25. So I got fined $1,000 for making the announcement.
You know, Charles, you better win this lawsuit just to pay your fines. I mean, if this keeps up like this.
Well, let me.
How do you answer? Yeah, go right ahead now.
I'd just like to add one other thing, too. You're talking about the commissioner having a personal vendetta. I don't like to sit here and make these accusations, but you asked me a question, right, Johnny, and I'm a little forthright, you know. At one time, Reggie Jackson, several years back in his career, when he was having trouble with his timing, I was going to send him down to AAA just for 10 days. Mm-hmm. And Reggie wanted to go down, too, for that 10 days. Commissioner Kuhn gets in touch with me, and he says, hey, you can't send him down. He said he read it in the paper that I was possibly going to send him down. Right. He said, you can't send him down. It won't be in the best interest of baseball. So I told him off, and after telling him off, I got fined $500 for that.
I was just going to make a guess that you were fined for that. I don't know why. Well, how do you answer some of the questions, and then the press brings it up occasionally. They say that only the very rich, in other words, you could buy a pennant. One town could go out, or an owner who's very, very wealthy, and buy all of the best players, and therefore, because of their better financial position, could cripple the other teams. Is there any validity to that at all?
No, John, I don't think so. I think that's all hearsay because Tom Yawkey who has, I don't know if anyone is more wealthy in baseball than Tom Yawkey. He's been in there about 40 years, and he's been trying to buy a world championship for all those years, and he's never been successful in doing it. This is a commissioner saying that I was breaking up my team. In reality, all I was doing was making it stronger for the start of 1977. It's awfully hard to go out and buy ball players. The competition is just too tough.
Do you think that the salaries are getting exorbitant or out of line? Because it's really not the players that set the salaries, is it? When you come right down to it, it's the law of supply and demand. I suppose the superstars that can command X number of dollars, and if they bring those people into the ballpark.
Johnny, really, the reason for these, in my opinion, astronomical, unjustified salaries for athletes today, it's not the athletes, believe me. It's these stupid owners that go out and offer that kind of money.
Well, now you're an owner.
Yes, I am, but I don't go out throwing my money down the drain like some of the others do, because in the first place, I can't afford it. In the second place, if I did have the money, I think I'd be much smarter than to pour it down the drain that way.
Yeah. Are the Oakland A's making money?
Well, let me put it this way.
How long have you had the A's now?
This is my 16th year, and I'm happy to tell you that in the 16 years that I've owned the club, we spent a lot of money to produce championship teams. We haven't made any big money, but by spending our money wisely, if I may put it that way, we've been able to stay in the black. Not very much, but we're in the black, and we hope we can stay in the black.
Good. All right, we'll have a couple more questions. I'll do this first, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Has your AC busted? Computer
away.
You won't believe what
We are back. I always want to make clear, before I bring George Peppard out, I just want to get one thing clear in my mind. At the end of the year, these ball players could leave your club and be open to open bidding anyway, right? In other words, you could lose them if you did not pay the salary that they requested. In other words, if Raleigh Finger said, I want $1 million, you would say, hey, I can't afford $1 million. And he could go to another club, right?
It's that simple. He can go out and sell his services to another club.
So really what you're doing, in effect, is selling him before not knowing whether you'll have him or not, right?
It's that simple.
Right. So this, you hope this goes to court, I assume, so that there will be a definite decision made on whether the owners have that right, or...
Johnny, we're going to court, and it's scheduled in federal court first week in August.
Well, I hope you come back and report on. We'll probably read it, but I'd like to get your version anyway. Incidentally, can you be fined for being on this show tonight? I'd like you to do something where you wouldn't be fined.
Johnny, I probably will be.
We'll take it to court and I'll fight it. It's fascinating. Stay with us tonight, will you? I'd like you to meet the rest of the people. George Peppard is here tonight. Currently, he's working on a film called Damnation Alley, and I think he just was wound up on the set to be with us tonight. Would you welcome George Peppard? George?